Hello and welcome to this session, Foundations of Data Teams. My name is Jesse Anderson. I'd like to thank you for spending this time with me. In this presentation, I'm going to go through foundations as a metaphor. We're going to be talking about houses and what we need to do and how we can create data products with our data teams. Here's our itinerary for the next few minutes. First, we're going to talk about houses, that metaphor, as I mentioned. And then we're going to talk about what sort of things aren't disclosed to us as we create our data teams. Then we're going to talk about the data teams themselves. What do we need? What are they? And we'll close out by talking about some of the implications of what happens if we don't have the right foundations for our data teams. Oftentimes, when we create our data teams, we're getting implicit instructions or implicit wants and desires. Sometimes we don't feel the need to specifically say, I need this or I need that. We just think it's implicit. And what happens is, as we see those houses, we focus on what's on the exterior and cosmetic. For example, if we have a house and we look at it and we see the cosmetics of it, we don't say, well, there's sheetrock on there, but I have to implicitly say there needs to be studs, there needs to be woods, there needs to be a foundation poured. It's just implicit that a house has all this. And we tend to focus on that exterior things, those cosmetic things. But what happens underneath, behind that cosmetic, is just as important. Here in this metaphor, our houses are the value created, this business value that's being created. We're going to create business value from the data, and that's our house. But in order to have that house, in order to have that value, it has to be constructed. We have to say our construction or our building is going to be created by the data teams. So let's talk more about what we need to do in order to have these data teams. And what often happens is we have this focus. If you've ever seen a movie or a movie backlot, this is what's in this picture. We focus on this facade, and there's this facade that we have of just this front. Look at this picture. If you were to be standing at that door and just be closed in or cropped in, you wouldn't know that there's absolutely nothing behind that. But here we can see the actual back of this that you don't normally see in the movie. So what's happened to us with our data teams creation and our focus on foundations is that we've just focused on that last part. And this last part is usually data science. We're just focused on that facade of data science, but we're missing the rest of the structure that allows us to create that house. We couldn't live in this house, for example. We need the rest of that structure. So what type of foundations do we need? As we can see in this picture, we see it's called a yurt. And if you're familiar with yurts, they don't actually have a foundation. In fact, they're part of this nomadic sort of civilization that they can pick up their yurt. Their yurt are designed to be mobile, and they can pick up that yurt and move it on. Do we have that same thing with our data teams? Do they need foundations? And it's an interesting thing as I started researching this and learning about houses and foundations, there was a person who said that houses that you don't need a foundation if you don't want it to stand for long. So that brings up the question, do we want our teams to stand for a long time? Do we need them for the life of our company? And in my opinion, the answer is yes. It's a common question from management where they ask and say, hey, do we just hire this data team and they create something and then we let them go, or it's a contract or something short term? The answer is no. Data teams go on for the life of that company. A truly data-focused and data-oriented company needs these teams for the life of the company. So as a result, we need a solid foundation that stands for a long time. Oftentimes, companies will think about what does it take to renovate or to add a new team in. And sometimes they've been told it's an easy renovation. Sometimes they've thought, well, I have an analytics department. Let's say they're BI, maybe they're just analysts, data analysts, something like that. And they think, okay, I've got these parts Adding advanced analytics, that's just going to be easy. That's just going to be an easy renovation. But as we can see in this picture here, just renovating the facade of this building is taking a significant number of people, and it's taking a team all working together, all dealing with various parts of this building. So this renovation, this changing of what we have, it's not easy. It's actually going to take a lot of people, a lot of effort, and a lot of time. And I really want management to understand this and internalize this fact that there are no such things as easy in data teams. That brings us to disclosure. What does disclosure mean? Depending on where you are in the world, there may be this law, an outright law that says when you sell a house, you actually have to disclose everything. You actually have to say, I'm selling you a house, and there are these things wrong with it. If you see the picture there on the right, you'll see the state of Nevada's seller's real property disclosure form. This is a form that has to be filled out and legally mandated, that you have to fill this out as a seller, and you have to say, here is every single problem with my house. Just so you know, I have to tell you about this. And so this sort of disclosure happens a lot of times around the world. Here in the US, it's in my state of Nevada, completely mandated. And what we have is an issue of, if we don't disclose, if we don't say, here are the problems of the house, there are legal remedies, there are legal ramifications. And if you are found in violation of those ramifications, then you actually have monetary problems. You will face a lawsuit as a direct result of this. So why is this disclosure actually important? Let's talk about whose job is it to disclose to you, and metaphorically, the issues with your team. So as you may be sitting there thinking, well, I have these problems, but nobody told me about them. Or I have a feeling that there's a problem, but who's really supposed to be talking to me about this? Well, is it your vendor's job to tell you this problem? I would say the vendors probably say, no, I don't actually have the need, or I'm not responsible for telling you your problems. Or we go to management. Oftentimes the issue with management isn't so much that the managers don't disclose, it's that they don't know. It's an unknown. And that can be a definite issue, where oftentimes this lack of foundation, or this knowledge of this lack of foundation, is actually part of something that they don't even know exists or is necessary. Are your individual contributors responsible for it? Sometimes the data scientists on a team with no other data teams realize this need. They actually realize, hey, there is a problem. We are missing something. They may not be able to point their finger at it and say, this is what I need, but they may realize, they may have said or told their direct manager, there's a problem, but how does that bubble up? Or is it a book that's responsible for telling you? There's lots of different moving pieces to who is responsible for this. And then, so you have sometimes an issue where somebody just didn't tell you. And then on the other side, you have other ones where people have said, it's actually easy. You don't need these teams. My technology is so easy. Just go ahead and don't even bother with data scientists. Don't even bother with data engineers. We've made it easy. So is it really that easy? This is a definite issue where some vendors are actually deliberately misleading in their disclosures. They're telling you in their marketing, don't need them. We make it easy. Press the easy button. We can handle it for you. And this is an issue where they're telling you, hey, you don't need that solid foundation. We've got you. We've made it so easy. And they're wrong, quite frankly. And this leaves you, as the company that's actually trying to implement this, caught in the lurch. The disclosures didn't happen. In fact, there was a disclosure that was not done at all. Now that we've understood this lack of disclosure, let's talk about the individual teams themselves and what they actually need to be doing. To start off with, our data teams are three. There are three different data teams we need to have. And we need data science, we need data engineering, and we need operations. Now, one common issue here is to say one of these teams is only one we need, or one of these teams is the most important one and the other ones aren't as important. However, you can see in this visualization that each one of them is necessary. They're a triangle. They're not a line. They're not, here's a weighted thing. Each one of these teams is absolutely necessary, absolutely crucial, absolutely vital if we're going to create value. So let's talk about what happens when one of these teams is missing. So one possibility is when we don't have data science. In this case, we can see in this picture, there's a foundation. You can see that foundation right there. You can see the building right there. However, there's no value being created because no one can actually live there. This is what data science gives us. It's a value creation. It's the cherry on top, as I like to say. It's a very big cherry, very difficult cherry, but it's the cherry on top. It's the thing that just having data in and of itself is somewhat valuable. Just having an operational excellence is somewhat valuable, but without the data science to bring it all together, then we're not able to create this X amount of value. Sometimes I go far as to ask leaders this question: if you're going to put forth the effort of having all of this data engineering and having all of this operations and just having maybe your business intelligence team or perhaps a data analytics team do your analytics and not do advanced analytics, is it really even worth it? Are you actually gaining the maximum amount of value that you could from your data? This data science team is crucial because we can have this foundation, we can have all that data, but if no one lives there, we're not creating the maximum amount of value for ourselves. Another common one that I've seen is when there are no data engineers. As you can see in this picture, there's a house there. It's crumbled because there's been a lack of engineering that happened. Perhaps the person who built it didn't understand how difficult a roof is to build or is to engineer, that they didn't put the right supports in place, that they did something happened that removed their sound engineering. So what happened there is that sound engineering is crucial. How does this manifest in data teams? I've seen this many times firsthand where companies have bought into this notion that data science is the only team they need, and maybe operations. And so they don't have any data engineering in place. This is exactly what happens. If you were to walk into these places, this visualization that you're seeing right here is almost exactly what you see each time. It is, we have all this data, we have all these systems, we're trying to do our advanced analytics, but every time we try to work with it, crash. It crashes in. There's a lack of sound engineering. And one manifestation of this is what's called technical debt. Data scientists will create a mountain of technical debt. And if you kind of imagine a mountain on top of that roof, there's no roof that can support a mountain. But if we have that mountain of technical debt, it will crush us every single time. And when we start to add those data engineers in, then we always have to go through and really pay down that technical debt. Then we have our operations team. With operations, we can have our sound engineering, we can have our advanced analytics, but if it's so messy, as we see in this picture, so neglected, so unkempt, that the business can't use it, then what good have we done? In this case, what will happen is that the business will try to go and use these advanced analytics. And if the thing is down so often, if the process is down so often, if the data products are down so often, if they're not working so often, what we need to do is we need to put our operations in place. We're missing this operations. Somebody could live in this house, but they won't because it's so messy, it's so neglected. We need operations to come in and make sure that we have something that is neat, tidy, operational, working for the business. So that brings us to some of the implications. What are the implications of foundations? What is really, really important about this? Well, it's incredibly important to build at the very beginning on top of a solid foundation. You can see in this picture, they're about to build a pretty tall building. They're having to dig a ways down. There's a ton of concrete being laid. You can see all the rebar if you're very sharp-eyed. There is a lot of effort going into this foundation. They're trying to make sure that this foundation is as solid as possible. They're spending probably millions of US dollars just to build this foundation. And they're doing that initially because it's so much cheaper, so much better, so much faster to do this when they're initially building, because otherwise we have problems. Now, if you saw that previous picture and you have a very good memory, you may actually recognize that that was the foundation of the Millennium Tower. And here's the story of the Millennium Tower. And it's a pretty important, I'd say, thing because you see the headlines that I've cropped there, that they didn't build their foundation right. It started tilting. It's leaning. Some people go so far as to say, we're worried that it's going to fall over, literally fall over, and then hit another building. And that would be absolutely terrible. And so we have this $750 million tilting tower, and there's lawsuits. There's a $200 million lawsuit from the tenants, the people who bought there. And now it's going to cost $100 million just to fix it. It's always cheaper to build it right. Fix it as soon as possible. This is incredibly important. We need to make sure that we have the right team. We have the right things in place. And this is a very clear example. We can see it being built. We could go back and look at the pictures of the foundation. They ostensibly had a foundation, but did they have the right foundation? And that's really the key question. Do we have the right foundation in place? Thinking back to our data teams, do we actually have all three data teams? Do we have our data engineering giving us a solid foundation? Do we have our operations making sure that somebody can actually live there? Do we have our data scientists, our data science team there to provide that cherry on top, that advanced analytics that makes it so that we have this building and somebody actually wants to live there? We're creating so much value that we want to, from our data science, that the team, the CEO, the board, whomever is thinking about, we need more, we want more. With this, we have a visualization I created talking about what happens when we don't build on solid foundations and when we do. As you can see there on the left, we have velocity and time. So over time, what should happen is that the team should gradually build on its solid foundation and gradually move up in velocity, gradually move up in complexity of what they're working on. And what we can see there is in the red, when a team lacks a foundation, what will always happen is that they will go up, get to a certain point, and it will just implode. You remember that image we just saw of the house where it just crushed down? It's exactly what happens with these teams. They get up to a certain point, their lack of foundation crushes, and they go back down. They try to go back up again, get to a point, crushes back down. Whereas teams, if they have the right solid foundation, they're always building on that solid foundation. So they get up to a point, they may level off, they'll go up to another point, level off, and keep on going up. They're building on a solid foundation. Otherwise, they're constantly dropping out. And this may be the manifestation to you, where as you think about your team, you may be thinking, oh, that's why we're always having this problem. This is why our technical debt is constantly happening. So what I'd like to end with and have you think about for your final thoughts is that an ounce of prevention, you may have heard that saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When I work with teams, I always tell them an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. Where if we go in and we can build that solid foundation initially, so much better. It's worth a ton of cure. However, if you're thinking, I already have a team and I'm going to have to go back and fix it. Don't think about that isn't fixable. I've helped fix teams. It is possible. It's just more costly and more time consuming. And it's more costly and time consuming because we have to go back. We actually have to go back, shore up their foundation. And once we have that foundation in place, usually it's paying down a lot of technical debt that the data science team may have created for us. So we're often having to get either the right data engineers in place or hire a data engineering team. I want you to take out of this, it is possible for us to fix these, but it's just going to be more costly. So with that, you may be thinking, well, I'd like to know more about data teams. How do I do this? I just wrote a book called Data Teams. I would encourage you to read it. I also created a website for it called datateams.io. You can find on that website more information about the book, the table of contents, what's covered, as well as some bonus videos. But what I would encourage you to do is if you're seeing within your organization some issues around, oh, I think we're missing this team and we're missing that team, the book really goes deeply into each one of the teams, what's made up of it. And I would say more importantly, we have that triangle. How do those teams actually work together? How do we make sure that each team is actually in a symbiotic relationship rather than an adversarial relationship? So with that, I'd like to thank you for coming, and I'd like to hear your questions and would love to interact with you if you have more questions about what you should do next.